Welcome to TRN Podcast, episode 161. Today, we're taking a closer look at the current situation in the oil markets. We want to understand what's driving those price changes, especially for heating oil.
That's right. And it seems like there are really two main things happening at the same time. You've got the dynamics in the big international markets, and then the specific situation for heating oil right here in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland.
Exactly. And just looking at the surface, it kind of feels like oil prices are generally heading downwards, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely the trend we're seeing internationally. It's like a salami slice method, you could say. Prices are falling, but it's not some dramatic crash. It's more of a steady step-by-step decline.
Interesting. And what's behind that? Is it still the trade tensions?
Very much so. Those ongoing U.S.-China trade issues, the ones kicked off by Donald Trump's tariffs, they're a huge part of this story.
Right. I heard the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, brought this up at the BRICS meeting in Brazil.
He did. He essentially called for countries not to be intimidated, urging joint BRICS action against those U.S. tariffs. A pretty strong stance.
Yeah, sounds like they're digging their heels in.
Absolutely. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry backed that up, basically saying no compromise. Cooperation only happens if China feels its firmness is respected. It really suggests things might escalate rather than calm down. Seems Beijing isn't really in the mood for talks right now.
And the U.S. response, I saw Treasury Secretary Bessent was talking about potential export bans against China, trying to strengthen their hand, maybe.
That seems to be the idea, yeah. But back in the U.S. itself, the reaction isn't exactly positive. Quite the opposite.
How so?
Well, there's a Reuters survey of economists. Get this. Not a single one expected these tariffs to actually help U.S. businesses. And even more worrying, something like 60% think there's a high chance of a global recession.
Wow, 60%. That's significant.
It is. And it's hitting confidence. The U.S. Business Climate Index, it's dropped to its lowest point since May 2020.
Ouch. So what are the specific complaints from businesses? What's causing the negativity?
It's a few things. They're dealing with supply bottlenecks, massive uncertainty for planning. I mean, how can you plan in this environment? And of course, rising costs, which they ultimately have to pass on to consumers.
Yeah.
Some business owners were even quoted using words like chaos and, well, the German word Wahnsinn, basically meaning madness.
Madness. Yeah, you can see why. Analysts must be worried too.
They are. They're talking about potentially irreversible damage.
Yeah.
And a real loss of trust in the U.S. as a reliable international partner. It's hard to rebuild.
It really is. And when you have the world's two biggest economies who are also the biggest oil consumers, let's not forget that.
And the U.S. is a major supplier, too.
Right. When they're locked in this kind of dispute, it makes sense that the outlook for oil demand turns bearish, turns negative.
That's exactly it. That's a huge driver. But it's not just demand. There's pressure from the supply side, too.
Oh, what's happening there?
Well, for one, the talks between the U.S. and Iran about the nuclear deal seem to be, well, constructive.
Yeah.
At least that's the word. And if that progresses, you could see sanctions on Iranian oil being lifted, meaning more supply hitting the market.
Okay, more potential supply from Iran.
And then there's OPEC Plus. They already announced an increase for May, right?
Yeah.
And now the chatter, the insider info, suggests they're discussing another increase for June. So potentially more oil coming from them, too.
So lower demand expectations because of the trade war, plus potentially more supply coming online.
It all points downwards.
Yeah.
And you see it in the prices. WTI is around, what, $61.57. Brent just dipped under $65, maybe $65.33 currently. Gas oil is about $620 a ton.
And the euro's holding around 1.14 against the dollar.
Exactly. So that whole international picture is quite bearish right now.
And you mentioned this is starting to filter through to the national heating oil markets here in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland.
It seems so. The heating oil prices here are also showing signs of maybe shifting from just moving sideways to actually starting a downward trend, mirroring what's happening globally.
That'll be welcome news for consumers, I imagine, especially since you said domestic demand is actually quite weak at the moment.
Yeah, demand isn't huge, but hopes for lower prices definitely are. People are watching closely.
What's the general feeling among customers? Do you get a sense of that?
We do track that with our Schwarmometer for heating oil. It looks at actual purchases versus just price inquiries. Right now, it shows a sort of medium buying intensity. But the really striking thing is the price expectation.
What are people expecting?
Overwhelmingly, the vast majority expects prices to fall further. They're holding off, hoping for a better deal.
Interesting. And are there actual signals suggesting it's a good time to buy in some places?
Yes, in some regions in Germany, our mathematical low-price system is actually flagging up buying opportunities now.
Okay, so the message for someone sitting on the fence is prices are looking pretty good, maybe even attractive, but there's a real chance they could drop even more.
That's pretty much the situation.
Oh, yeah.
It's a tricky call. But we have seen some significant drops recently, haven't we?
We have. You mentioned new lows for the year.
Absolutely. Both Germany and Austria hit new record lows for the year for heating oil prices. And Switzerland is getting very close to its yearly lows, too.
Yeah.
We saw prices drop by up to 0.7 cents per liter in Germany or 0.7 rappen in Switzerland.
Wow, almost a full cent or rappen per liter drop in some cases. What triggered that latest dip? More economic data?
Yes, exactly. Fresh economic data out of both the U.S. and China really pushed oil prices down further. That's when we saw Brent slip under $65, WTI went below $60, and icy gas oil is now just hovering above the $600 mark.
So what did the data show? More bad news from the trade war fallout?
Pretty much. In the U.S., consumer confidence fell for the fifth month straight. It's at its lowest level in nearly 5 years. People are worried about rising unemployment, higher living costs. It dampened spending outlooks.
Not surprising. And China?
Also not great. Industrial activity there shrank in April 2025, the biggest contraction in 16 months, apparently, which kind of contradicts the government's claims that they're weathering the U.S. tariffs just fine.
Right. What were the numbers? The PMI?
Yeah, the Purchasing Managers Index for industry fell to 49. Anything below 50 suggests contraction. The Services and Construction Index was still technically growing at 50.4, but that was also down. So a slowdown across the board, really.
But is everyone convinced this data means prices will just keep falling?
Well, there are some nuances. One economist, Zichun Huang, suggested the negative PMI outlook might be more about sentiment right now. The argument is that the real economic downturn might not be quite as severe yet, which could actually lead to slightly rising oil prices in the short to medium term, perhaps as sentiment corrects a bit.
Ah, okay. So a bit of uncertainty still remains about the immediate impact.
Exactly. And there's another point. Some suggest the current economic data might be a bit skewed. How so?
Because there might have been a surge in trade before the latest round of sanctions or tariffs fully kicked in, like companies rushing orders through.
Ah, I see. So the full impact of the U.S. tariffs policy might still be waiting in the wings, potentially pushing prices down further later on.
Yeah.
That's the thinking. Yeah, there could still be more downward pressure to come from that front.
Fascinating. So with these new record low prices appearing, how are heating oil buyers reacting now? Are they jumping in?
Oh, definitely. The reaction has been really noticeable. Demand for heating oil basically tripled compared to normal levels. And on Heizöl 24, the number of people searching for deals shot up fivefold. People clearly recognize these low prices.
A five-fold increase in searches. Wow. Are the price tracks uniform across the countries?
Not quite. The average drops varied. Austria saw about a 0.05 cent per liter drop on average recently. Switzerland was more like 0.35 rappen per liter. And Germany saw the biggest average drop, around 0.7 cents per liter.
Quite a difference, especially for Germany. And you mentioned Heizöl 24 has a tool to help people catch the right price.
Yeah, the price alert feature in their info center is really handy if you're waiting for a specific price point. It just notifies you. Saves constant checking.
Good tip. So wrapping things up, it really feels like an unusual time where almost all the signposts are pointing towards fallen oil prices.
It really does. You don't often see such a strong convergence of bearish factors all at once.
And it serves as a reminder, doesn't it, that longer term, thinking about reducing our energy consumption is probably the most sustainable strategy anyway.
Absolutely. This whole situation just highlights how interconnected everything is: global politics, economics, and the energy markets that affect us all.
So let's quickly recap the key takeaways then. Heating oil prices are currently trending downwards.
Yeah, driven by that combination of international trade tensions, weaker economic data, and the expectation of more oil supply coming onto the market.
So for you listening, the big question might be, given these dynamics, what's the smartest strategy if you need heating oil soon? Wait, by now?
It's a tough one,
Yeah.
but hopefully this gives you more context.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. How might this evolving global trade landscape continue to shape energy markets and ultimately the decisions we all make as consumers in the future? Something to ponder. That's our look at the markets for today.